right, everybody, welcome to my show. Indeed, today a special guest with us, one of the greatest musicians from Mississippi. His name is Steve Azar, and Steve's joining us from Greenville right now. How's everything going, Steve?
John, thank you for that intro. I appreciate that. Always humbled to hear I'm in the conversation with anyone that's done anything special musically, and everything's good here in Greenville and the Delta, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Basically just right off the bat, because this is I'm in Tupelo, the hometown of Elvis Presley. Did you ever cross paths with Elvis in your life?
My mom did. You know, she grew up in a grocery store on Highway 61. And just as a matter of fact, oh, he played our high school. You know what I mean?
Oh.
And I go, well, all right, can you give me a little excitement? She goes, oh, we loved Elvis. But it was Elvis before Elvis was Elvis.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Like, I think she saw him in the Wonder Years, and then Charlie Pride used to shop at the store when he was a baseball player, a really good baseball player. And over the years, Charlie and I would end up playing the Opry a number of times, and he was so nice to me. He would never say my name. He would always sing my songs to me.
Hey,
and it was so funny. It was like the greatest compliment. So anyway, obviously Elvis, man, I mean, game changer for the world of music, and we get to claim him, which is amazing.
Now, you've played with some of the band members, right? Haven't you?
I have. We did a record. David Briggs was with Elvis for a number of years. He was from the Muscle Shoals days. He played on 1,000 #1 records. So when I went and when I moved back from Nashville after 20 years and I guess I wrote this record, and it ended up becoming the band ended up becoming Steve Azar and the King's Men. And we toured for a few years under it. We have a documentary out called Something in the Water, the chronicles the making of it. We made it with 4 B.B. King's guys. Went right after B.B. passed. One of Elvis's, which was David Briggs, and one of Little Milton's, and some of my guys. And we had a lot of fun doing it, and it's one of those records I was really proud of making. And you know, growing up and in the world of blues and country and rock and roll and gospel, and it was like a lot of those guys all coming together, and cool. We had a lot of fun.
That was cool. And so, how did you get into this business? I mean, take us back to when you were young, and were you always crazy about music, and how did you get into this?
Played a lot of sports growing up, and that appeased me. And we had a very athletic class growing up, so played every sport there was, and then leveled it down as I got older, but and narrowed it down. But that kept me pacified, I guess, and is the word. But musically, it was 10 years old. I'm looking over here. When you walk in my house, there's a picture of Eugene Powell. And Eugene lived behind my dad's liquor store. My dad opened the first legal liquor store in Mississippi called the Jigger and Jug.
Oh.
And Eugene would be back behind there playing. And when I was 10 years old, there were postmen sitting on crates, you know, Pepsi crates. And I remember walking back there and not sure what it was that he was doing. All I know is I fell in love with it, and he was playing and singing about the pain he was going through, and he let me go back there, and I tell you, man, it was a game changer. So I raced home, I'll never forget, to write about whatever problems I had going on, because you know, I knew that he was writing about stuff that was sad, but he was making you feel good about it. I had the instinct to understand that at that young age. And so as time would go on, I guess in the next 4 or 5 months, I raced to learn to play guitar so I could put the words that I'd written, you know, to music. And then eventually, you know, one thing happens after the next. And, you know, I've been doing it since 10, and we're almost 40 years in now. Crazy.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, and your influences, who are some of your influences, basically? I mean, growing up, I mean, who did you...
obviously Eugene was a huge influence. Little Milton, he was always really nice to me. He called me Little Azar. He could see me going from vans to big trucks and then eventually tour bus and all that. And, you know, when I started having hits, but I had a career before my career nationally and globally. I was a regional act, and my brother and I were on the road together, and he was running the show and running Front House Sound. And I was, you know, writing the songs and playing the music. And when I graduated college, we had 200 one-nighters on the books. We had 10 guys on the payroll and 2 28-foot trucks of gear. So we were, you know, we had to pay for all that gear. So it kept us sort of locked in, and a lot of tragedy happened with some of those guys. And And it was a tough time for me. And eventually, when I thought nothing was working out, all of a sudden in 1 week, it was three different guys who came along and said, "Hey, you need to go to Nashville." At that time I'd been going to New York,
Uh-huh.
and L.A. and real close. I didn't know exactly musically where I fit, and I was trying to find myself, and that's part of being a Mississippi musician. At some point, there has to come a time when you've let all these influences in, and then you have to become yourself. And when I finally became myself, it was still a little bit of a mutt, um, and I was a little different for country. They said I don't have to be Meat on Monday and Waiting on Joe. They never get played on country radio, and Monday's been, I think, to this date since 2000, has been one of the top five played songs on country radio. Period. So, when you start figuring it out, you know what it sounds like, and I felt like that was something special. And then Waiting on Joe was a surprise for me.
Mm-hmm.
But once Morgan Freeman jumped in and did the video and did the narrative that I'd written and all that, then I knew that that's who I was. And I had made enough mistakes along the way with an independent label before and all that before I signed with Mercury and which became Universal, that I wasn't going to make any more mistakes. So I was going to be truly honest, no matter what, no filters. I'd finally figured myself out, and that's so important for artists to know. When opportunity comes knocking, you may get another shot, but boy, it's better to be prepared as much as you possibly can be, and understanding who you are as an artist when you finally get those shots. So I overcame a bad shot, and not being prepared, and then all of a sudden the good Lord said, "I'm gonna give you one more," and things really worked out.
So Little Milton, I mean, you mentioned he gave you some advice at one time, right? Something about the good
Always.
times and the bad times.
Oh yeah, man. He just said, "Little Azar, you're going to do this, aren't you?" Because he would see that I wasn't. That he could see that things were growing. He could see my name out there, and he'd come and hub in and out of Greenville, and he would see it, and he'd notice it, and he'd say those things. So when I got to have little Ray Neal play on my Kingsmen record and play with me a bunch, it was so awesome, because when we made this record in Club Ebony, and nobody had ever done that, and we turned it into a studio. And we started talking about this song down at the liquor store that I wrote, and Eugene was in it and one of the verses, and it was the story of my life. Took me forever to write it. Took me going, living here, going to Nashville for 20 years, coming back home and seeing my life full circle before the song made sense. And after that, it just wrote itself. But he raced over there to the museum because Little Milton had given Little Ray one of his guitars, and it still had the sparkle from Little Milton's jacket on the guitar, and we pulled it out of the case, and it was such a cool moment, and put new strings on it. And he came and he played on down at the liquor store that old Little Milton guitar, and there was just so many things happening, and this happened in my life, that you look back and you're going like, look at that was in the works. Even if it took 10 years, it would eventually happen. And you could always look back and pinpoint a time in your life when that had to happen for all those years for the success to happen. Life's an interesting thing, especially when you're doing the same thing and you're spending your entire life on a career.
Sure.
Eventually, it comes back and gives you a big old hug.
I mean, basically, it's one of those situations where one door may close, another door opens for you.
Yeah, and look, I've been told this by, when I was doing my radio show in the Mississippi Minute, one of my friends was telling me, because, we never had these discussions when we were all struggling in Nashville trying to write hits. But after one of us did, and the next one did, we all realized it was doable. And then we start doing it, and we have just celebrated each other's success. And I remember talking to, and I can't remember who it was, but he said, "Steve, you know what? I'd get to a place where there was nothing. And then I would go, he would say, somebody quit here, and I'm not going to quit. I'm not quitting here." Mm-hmm. And that was so poignant and so prophetic, because I was going like, yeah, that's what we all did. We didn't quit there, when a lot of people have. And, because of circumstances, you don't know. People, it could be monetarily, it could be family, it could be, a lot of things. So you can say what you want, and it's just not easy for everybody. And I'm, people, I've worked really hard, so I feel like my luck happened with the hard work, but at the same time, it took a lot of prayer and a lot of luck.
So, and then there was years with Bob Seager. I guess you opening
Yeah,
act and
yeah.
working with Bob Seager. Tell us something about
He
that.
was awesome, man. Get the call, and it's such a joke because Eric Church has said this many times, and so I had the first 7 shows, and it was all up in North and all up in Michigan.
Uh-huh.
Started in Grand Rapids and Saginaw, and we made our run, and it was in the beginning of the fall, and so it was going incredibly well. And the Seeger's fans were giving me standing ovations, and then Bob and them said, "I want you to do a longer set." And so I said, "That's awesome," and it was just a perfect fit. And I was doing my Mississippi thing, and he was saying, "You're really from there." And Bob would come out, and the first song he did was "I Went Down to the Delta," and it was a song off of his "Face the Promise" tour.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know this, but a Greenville, Mississippi man co-wrote "Old Time Rock and Roll." So
Okay.
I mean, this is like he goes deep into the Delta. So it may have been Hollandale, Greenville, somewhere right in this
Mm-hmm.
area. But with all that said, uh, Eric Church had the next 50 plus shows, and he was on Capitol Records. I wasn't. I had just left Universal and doing my own thing. I was still with CAA, and the bottom line is that there was no way I was going to do any more than 7 dates. And my publicist called once Eric had started the tour and said, Bob is still saying that you're with him. He thinks you're with him because he's writing about, hey, just like my act on the road with me, Steve Azar, however he put it, who I'm touring with.
Mm-hmm.
We've played a lot live, and I think it was a reference to American Idol, what he thought about it. And he was talking about us growing up playing live a lot, and he was using me in that sentence. And then she goes, "He's going to call," and I said, "There's no way. There's no way Eric Church is starting to roll." And I'll be dog if I didn't get the call. And Eric always makes a joke that he got kicked off the Bob Seger tour. I got the next 40 something dates, and it was glorious. But I told I always make the comment that, Eric, look what happened to your career. You're welcome. I like because he blew up right after that, and he blew up because I feel like that he was going to blow up no matter what. He's a great singer songwriter, but I felt like we were such a good fit with Bob and the crowd. That's another example of growing up in Mississippi, playing for all types of people. And when opportunity comes, all those people were there, like in one arena, And
That's
so
cool.
the next time he took him and Joe Walsh went out, and they would call and they wanted me to come fill in for some shows. And then I think it was Jay Giles' band another time. So I was in great company, but because I was working, I was never able to go and fill in on the next tours. So anyway, but it was a wonderful experience, and it was a awesome thing getting to play with one of your heroes, Bob and Springsteen and
Man.
Mellencamp. Those guys were great. They were influences of mine. John Denver and guys that sang and wrote about where they were from, and at the same time didn't exclude anyone. And I wanted to be able to be that for Mississippi.
Now you've done both, obviously, the singing and the writing. Which would you pick over?
Oh man, I love it
Writing or-
all. I love it all. I mean, I got to tell you, each one of them has their value.
Uh-huh.
So for me, the songwriting process is awesome because I understand it now, and I don't force anything. And when a song writes itself, it's the most beautiful thing. But getting the chance to finally go in and record it, and then these days I can record at my own pace. I'm not a kid waiting on somebody to figure out how we're going to get the money, thousands and thousands of dollars to go record one song. Now you can do it, so easily. It's just awesome. But with that said, along the way, I learned to do that myself and not have to wait on anybody. And but when you get to play it for folks, that's the cherry on top. So each one has its value. And when you start at the foundation, and that's writing the song, and then you finally get to see the whole house built, and that's playing it for folks. And there's nothing better as well. So it all adds up to me. When I wrote the state song, One Mississippi, which is my most grateful moment by far, nothing I will ever do will amount to being a part of history, Mississippi history. And and not ever thinking that's anything that you could even imagine, right? New
Sure.
flag and then new state song. With that said, that song was a perfect example of writing itself. It's a 6.5 minute song, and I promise you, if I could have written it that fast on paper, it would have been 6.5 minutes. There was no edits. There was nothing. It all fell out melodically, chord wise. Everything fell out at one time, and it was just one of those things where I was prepared for the moment when the inspiration came and when when I was asked to do it. And I just thought, well, to write this song was originally the official bicentennial song. That's why I wrote it. And then it became the state song. So pretty amazing what comes along in your life. And the move back to Mississippi was questionable because my managers they had like about a handful of acts. It was me, ZZ Top, Fleetwood Mac. I mean, there wasn't many of us in their stable. And CAA, I had the biggest agent in the world and in country music for sure. He had Keith Urban, and now he's got Darius. He's got everybody. Darren Murphy at CAA, and we were all dear friends and played golf together. We spent Thanksgivings together. We cooked meals together. Our families grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
And when I decided to move home and move my wife, who's from Arkansas, and our kids who were never, they were all born and raised in Nashville.
All right.
And they were 10, 13, and 15 when we moved them back here. They graduated from my high school. Everybody that I was working with in Nashville thought I'd lost my mind. And maybe I did. But it was the most important thing for my kids, I can tell you that. I also didn't want to play 150 shows a year. I wanted to coach basketball and be a part of their life before they took off, And now one's in New York, one's in L.A., and one is a med school student, third year in Jackson. So the Mississippi Delta and Mississippi in general shaped their lives. I mean, it molded them way beyond what Nashville would have ever done.
Family is very important. I mean, obviously,
Man, it is.
Music career and everything was great, but it's great to me that you can do, help out your family and be with your family.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, it's such precious moments.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be a dad that was always gone,
Yeah, you can. Yeah, those things you really can enjoy that part of life. Right?
Sure.
Let me ask you about the Saint Cecilia Foundation. Tell us a little about that. That's your charity.
We started it in Nashville. My wife used to go, "You need to do this," and I'd say, "I'm not ready yet." She goes, "You're never going to be ready if you keep saying that." So let's do it. So back in the day, I was sponsored by ExxonMobil for North America, and my bus they were trying to convert on the runs, or they were trying to convert Tiger Marts to these on the run brand. And it's funny, when I was up in the Pacific Northwest and into Canada, I saw the on the runs there. I don't think it ever took hold nationwide, but our bus had the on the run in my picture, and I was looking in your car. It was crazy, but they were a great sponsor back in the day, and we did like 4 or 5 years together. So I would host the CMA Sports Challenge every year, and ExxonMobil became the sponsor. So I would bring in all these athletes. So I had Jim McMahon, John Daly,
Cool.
Jim Kelly, Steve Berline, Mark Rippon. I had all these quarterbacks and athletes that all come together, and a bunch of actor friends of mine, and we would compete in all these sports skill challenges, right? And then we'd go do a concert at BB King's in Nashville, and the money we'd raise, we'd give it, to the Arts for Kids and in the Mississippi Delta or in Memphis, St. Jude, the Palmer home. There were some things that were attractive to us at the time. Well, we moved home to Greenville. We had all my old friends that I grew up with. We had an amazing community of folks that wanted to take it up a notch. So we decided to put on the Delta Soul Celebrity Golf and Charity event. We're in our 13th year. We've given a little over $1.3 million to date to all these wonderful charities, from Camp Looking Glass to the Boys and Girls Club to Scholarships for Kids. Got to put a music department in our my old high school where my kids went, I went. My dad was the first graduate of, which is a Catholic school down here, St. Joe. I mean, it's been so wonderful. We don't have programs. We support the programs, and we get about 70% of our money, well, it used to be, I could be off a little bit, but comes in from out of state. Okay. And that money, they leave it and park it here in the Delta, and they want to help out. So we have 30 celebrities come in from all walks, and we, it's a big golf event, and the women do their thing and do luncheons, and we have a big night, and we've had 30 Grammys on stage before,
And
so it's pretty crazy.
so, and then you just mentioned you can be seen on Super Talk, or not seen, or seen and heard, I guess, because you do.
Well, no,
stream
I
and
haven't.
do-
I haven't done the scene thing yet. They keep begging me.
Okay, because
It's so
I didn't know if
funny,
you
but
did, I didn't know if you did the scene part too, because I know there's a lot of Super Talk folks do that little streaming.
yeah,
You don't do that
yeah,
yet, but you can be heard
and
every week.
yeah, it's been 7 years. I'm in my 7th year. I've had the best time, and just like when you're asking me these questions, I was always used to being asked questions. I never took the time to even ask my dad questions that were relevant. And when I would interview folks, my first interviews, John, were John Daly and Jim McMahon and Richard Karn from Home Improvement, my buddy Gary Valentine from the King of Queens, and Bill Engvall. I remember them being my first, and then Grant Fuhrer, great hockey player, the first 6. And it was going to be strictly celebrity friends and talking about their lives. And it was amazing. I said, oh my goodness, we have been together and on the golf course for hours and hours together. We have spent all these events together. And I never asked them these questions that were so relevant to their lives of growing up and how they happened to get there. And it's been the greatest thing asking the questions. And I'm going to tell you something. It's a whole lot more fruitful for me learning about others than anybody learning about me. So I have been so blessed at Super Talk, and I have been in this partnership. They've been a great team to work with. They let me do my thing, and we've become such good friends, and it's been very successful. And so we're in our 7th year. I mean, it's crazy. Two new shows every week, a couple encore ones each week. It goes to podcast after that, but it's been something that's really been vital for my happiness down here.
You talk about learning a lot. We've learned a lot here in the last 20 minutes about you and your life and everything. I do hear that you have a secret, like a chili recipe, right? That's there's a little secret that you have. What is that?
It's a lot of meat and a lot of beans. I'm telling you, so maybe some coffee grinds used in it.
There you go.
I mean, there's so many things in it, but there's probably 4. Used to be 3 meat, 3 bean. Now it's 4 meat, 4 bean. And there's no telling the next time I make it. But yeah, there's a lot going on in that bowl of chili, and I make a pot the size of it could feed maybe half a Tupelo. I don't know.
Oh, there you go. Maybe one of these days we'll have you here in Tupelo during Chili Fest.
Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love it.
All right.
I'd love it.
Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure to have you on my show.
Thanks, John.